And we're live. Welcome everyone. Happy Sunday. I almost said it was a different day, but it's Sunday because we're always here on Sunday. Because Sundays are for pasta and for cooking and for friends. That's right. Bella, how are we doing today?
We're doing great. How's everybody?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. How is everyone out there? Where's everyone joining us from this week? We're here early. Don't worry. There's room for everyone. Please find a seat. Make your way up to the front. There's a front row right here. No one is seated there yet. If you guys want to find your way, right up here, I'm saving those VIP seats. That's for you right there. You, yep. In the VIP row. Come on down. Welcome. And here we go. We have what, 5 minutes?
I think we have
We got about 5 minutes?
Yeah, 4 minutes to
4
go.
minutes? You know what?
Making sure there's no technical difficulties.
Or equipment difficulties, because you know what I forgot to grab?
What's that?
Like a side towel.
A towel.
I need a side towel.
Everyone
Is that okay
make
if I
sure,
disappear? Not to put you on the spot. It's okay. You're here early. We're good.
Make sure everybody has their mise en place, unlike Chef Joe. No, just kidding. San Diego is here today. White Plains, New York. Philadelphia area. Florida. Denver. Near Chicago. Lincoln, California. Joining from DC. Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Sorry, I was late. You all are here on time. We're good. We're
Another Philadelphia. Welcome, everybody.
welcome. Come on in. You're in the right place.
Toronto.
Don't worry, no one's late. Toronto's here?
Yes.
Is that Duffy?
No.
Okay. I was like, she signed up too. How's everybody doing? Good, great. I feel good. First stream of the new year. We're in 2021.
2021, everyone.
2021. 2020 is behind us. Just because we're changing the date on the calendar, everything's better now. Bella's looking at me like I'm crazy. Doesn't matter. We're cooking today. That's what's going to make everything better. One of my favorite things, risotto, with one of my favorite products, Plenty. So,
I'm obsessed with Plenty.
Bella's obsessed with Plenty.
I love Plenty so much.
And you know what's interesting is like we fell in love with this product like before we decided to do this whole risotto thing. Is like Bella fell in love with the little crispy lettuces that they make. They have a variety of products, 4 different greens right now. They're working on some fruits and vegetables, which I'm very excited to see how those come out because all of these greens, I mean, you've had vegetables, you've had greens, but until you've had these, can I say life-changing?
It is.
It's really good.
They're really
And not
good.
to like hype it up so much, but like everybody in the Bay Area that was able to try and get one of these with a little coupon, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like they are really good.
Yeah.
Crisp, refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
There's texture, there's flavor.
Yeah.
They're like succulent and moist and watery and
We
just
haven't
like.
started yet, so
Ugh.
we'll get into.
I
once
love
we
it.
Start. This is
All right.
just small talk.
This is small
everyone.
talk. I'm just getting all worked up just
We
talking
have
about greens.
Albany, New York is here. Mexico City.
Mexico City?
Mhm.
Like Mexico City, Mexico?
Yeah.
Nice. Welcome.
Paso Robles, Boston, DC, Portland, Oregon.
All over the country
Your
and
buddies
world.
in Anchorage, Alaska. Hi.
Welcome. What's up, Alaska peeps?
Hi.
My buddies? Are those like my best friends that we did that little
I
like
think
private
we did a
class for?
Yeah.
Yeah, was it the Penguin Crew or there's like a mountain crew too?
Mountain Crew. I
The Mountain
think.
Crew.
I'm pretty sure it's a Mountain Crew.
There was a Penguin Crew
Let
as
me
well,
know.
I think, from Alaska.
Louis says yes, Mexico, chef.
Mexico, yeah. Hola.
Oh, I can't wait to get there.
I know. We're so close to
So
being able to
close.
travel again.
Yes, everyone is so close to be able to traveling again and healing. So great.
Exciting times. All right, we got like I'm gonna wait till 2:01 to get started just in case. I forgot to put a sign up out front, so if anybody got lost on the way in, they can't find parking. I want to make sure that we don't start before anybody gets their way here. I know it's a long walk from the parking lot all the way up to where we are, so
Metaphorically
rush.
speaking.
no rush. Yeah, don't worry. There's no one here. It's just us.
It's just us.
You didn't miss anything. Like someone's like, "Oh my gosh, what? I didn't get the invite. Like I could have been there." No, you could not have been here. It's just us.
We're here virtually together.
Yeah, we're here virtually. We are chilling.
Yes. I'm so excited. I love risotto. I love Plenty greens. I'm really excited for this and to eat this. It's going to be delicious.
I'm excited to share risotto making.
It's 2 p.m., chef.
It's 2 p.m. We said one more minute. I said we're going to wait till 2:01. just in case.
201 having fun.
Is that a phrase?
No, I made it up.
She made it up.
Berkeley and Denver and San Diego and
Welcome
San
everyone that's just joining us. Don't worry, we're giving it another minute for anybody that is having, I don't know, technical modem dial-up issues.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. Dial-up. We are not on dial-up today. We are. Oh, there it is.
Stop. Okay.
Now it's time. Bella's timer went off. Now we can begin
Welcome
the
everyone.
live stream. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. The first live stream of the new year, 2021. If you're just joining us here, thank you. If this is, I don't know, not your first time, I guess you could say, welcome back. Thank you for supporting me. That means you enjoyed the last one, and you must be excited for this one. If this is your very first time here, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to come into your homes, into your living rooms, into your kitchen, wherever you may be today watching this. Thank you. I couldn't do this without you, and I truly mean that. We have Bella here with us, as always, doing all of the technical chat room and streaming behind the scenes over there. Options, if you have questions throughout, that's what the chat room is for. Because obviously you can't unmute yourself. This isn't Zoom. So there's no unmuting, there's no actually talking directly to me, but it's live. So I'm here to answer questions throughout. Try your best, please, to keep your questions to what we're actually working on. And if you're like one of those students that always likes to jump ahead and read ahead in the textbook and like you're way over there and you're already making arancini tomorrow, but you're trying to do it right now, just hold that question till the end. So that way we're not jumping all over the place, we're not confusing everyone else, and we can stay at a nice cook-along style pace. That being said, it is a cook-along. We're going to make everything start to finish here. But if I end up going too fast for you, don't freak out. Don't stress. Cooking should be fun. It should be easy. Should be stress-free, and that's what I'm here for. If you get behind or, you need to go take a break, the doorbell rings, fill up your water, whatever it is, just hit that pause button. That's going to then stop the stream. You can catch back up and do whatever you need to do after we're all done later tonight once it uploads, because, the internet doesn't happen instantly. The video needs to upload. It'll get resent out, and you'll have a new link with a recording to this entire stream forever. And that's yours to refer back to forever, as many times as you'd like to make risotto. And hopefully maybe after the 5th time you've watched it, you don't need to watch it anymore. And you're just like, I'm a risotto pro. So I hope we all get there. Big shout out today. Plenty. That's what this class is really all about. Yes, we're making risotto, but I want to bring awareness to this wonderful product. Plenty is a farm. They are a vertically indoor grown farm. They are farmers, yes, here based in the Bay Area, and they just grow such an incredible product. I thought rice and risotto would be a great way to kick off the new year, to celebrate what they do and show it in a very unique way, showcasing the greens in their raw state, because they're absolutely delicious right out of the container, but they also can be manipulated and used in other ways. So we're going to turn it into a puree. It's going to make our rice flavorful, vibrant, green, earthy, nutty, and delicious. That puree then can be used to make our arancini with our leftover risotto. And then it's also just a really, really tasty snack. So good. You were here earlier, you heard me talking about it. One of the beautiful things about this, it's vertically grown in these like sealed room type chambers where they never get touched by contaminants, by pollutants, by outside dirty air or hands. Your hands are the first to actually touch these greens when you open them up, so they don't need to be washed, they don't need to be cleaned. You need them right out of the container. The same can't be said for these leeks. They grow in the ground, they're dirty, you gotta wash them, but that's okay. Shall we jump right into things?
I think so.
Let's do it, right? So first things first, let's get a pot of water, like I have here, on the stove. It doesn't need to be crazy big, but that's going to be our blanching pot to puree our kale into a nice, smooth, vibrant green puree. So make sure you get that on the stove first before we get into anything, so we're not waiting for water to boil by any means, because that's really boring. No one likes that. I'm going to pull this actually off the stove because it's nice and hot, and I am not ready for it yet. But instead, I'm going to start heating up what I'm going to use for my stock pot. The basis for any risotto or rice dish is a stock. And you can use anything from water, which is essentially kind of like a flavorless stock, to chicken stock, vegetable stock. But what I want to use here is a leek stock. One, because leeks are kind of like a misunderstood vegetable. People often will throw away part of the leek, not realizing you can use the entire thing. It has great oniony, kind of like vibrant, that spicy onion flavor and aroma, without that pungency that you get from onions. It kind of has that same kind of funkiness that you get from garlic, without that lingering flavor that garlic can often have. So, I thought it'd be fun to use leeks in their entirety to really highlight not only plenty, but the rice all together and show people, how to handle a leek. I don't like seeing leek tops go to waste, so this is a great opportunity to use the entire leek. We're gonna make a stock, that's the base for our rice. For our stock base, I'm gonna do it here in this pot. You can see over in the side. We'll flip back and forth between the two monitors just to see what's easiest for everyone, so you can see what's happening. We're gonna start by cutting our leeks up. On the stove, our pot that we're using, we're making a charred leek broth. I like charring vegetables often when I'm making stocks with them. It kind of gives you more complexity of flavor. It's not as just like veggie sweet forward. You kind of get this underlying caramelization and richness to it, which I think is really nice in this case. Our leek, we have two parts. It grows up out of the ground, straight up like this. This is our leek. Oh, look at it, it's growing. So because of that, dirt gets inside of the leek, inevitably, because it's getting pushed up through the ground, so dirt gets down in here. So it's really important that we wash our leeks really well when we use them. I always like to give them a quick wash before doing anything that rinses off any outside dirt that may be on the exterior of the leek, and then it gets rid of any dirt that's on these big fibrous green parts. The top to the leek, people often just cut up and discard. I don't like to do that. There's tons of different uses for this. If you cook it down and blanch it very well, cut it into small pieces, you can use it in place of like chives. You can dry it out into a powder, dust it on top of things like French fries, potato chips, even using it in pasta dough. Or as we're going to do today, we're going to use it as a base for our stock. So I have my leek tops cut off. I'm gonna break these down into about 1-inch strips. And then we're gonna go right into our hot pot dry. It's important, when you're charring a vegetable, you want it dry, because then you're going to get that blackened, pulling out all of the moisture. You're not adding any fat or oil, which, not every stock you don't want fat or oil in. So this is a great way to utilize that vegetable to get that stock started in cooking by charring the vegetable. You can see that, right? There's good light.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell for a second. Then we have our leek bottom here. So you can eat this whole thing. Some people only like to use the whites, depending on how refined or what flavor profile you're going for. That might make sense where you only have the whites, but in this case, where we're using it, we're going to use the entire thing. Just about every risotto starts with some sort of onion as a base, whether that be leeks, shallot, garlic, white onion, yellow onion, sweet onion, Spanish onion. Some sort of onion plays really well with the rice. It's that sofrito element, that cooked down veg that kind of acts as our base for the risotto. Heck, you can even use sofrito, like if you take in the bolo class with me or you make sofrito, that'll work really well as a base for rice. But cutting a leek, let's talk about it, right? So we have our stem down here, the root end that's holding everything together. We're going to split our leek in half. So now we have these two halves. Sometimes I'll come in here and I will peel off this outer portion just because it's sometimes fibrous and really hard to use. That could go right to our leek stock. And then I'm going to take advantage of this back end that's holding everything together. Much like if you've ever cut onions, sometimes you'll leave the root on as it helps hold everything together. When I'm trying to finely dice leeks, I always take advantage of that bit that holds everything there, so that way I'm able to come down the whole leek and cut really thin strips straight down. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. And I'm not going all the way to the root. So that way I'm able to pick this up. I have all of these strips and thin pieces, much like that, but they're still all held together in the back. That's going to make dicing these and slicing these much more neat, organized, and efficient.
We have our first question. Should we put the tops from both leeks in for the stock?
Yes. I have my other leek already cut up and washed. I just wanted to show you the one. Good question. All the leeks into the pot.
Yes.
This is just demoing the one leek. Great question. And if you have like a giant leek that's like, monstrous, you could just use the one. I bet is more than enough leek. But depending on the leeks you get, sometimes they're rather tiny, and that's why two is kind of a good way to go. Yeah. So I'm just showing the one, but imagine that my other one is not already cut up. I just want to show everyone.
Demo one.
Have the other one already prepared. All right, so we'll come in now, cutting from the loose end here with the back, holding everything together. And we're going to slice this as thin and as fine as possible. The reason being is you want whatever onion or allium product that you're adding to your rice to totally melt down. You want that sofrito to be a hidden element. You don't want to know you're chewing on leeks or chewing on onions. You want it to be almost completely melted by the time you're adding your rice. When I was learning how to make rice at Quince, it's here in San Francisco, many, many moons ago, which is, so many great stories talking about learning rice and cooking rice at Quince, which we'll could definitely get into as we start the rice process. But we used to use yellow onion for that only, never anything else. And it always had to be chopped by hand to the point where it was like an onion paste. Think of it as like the finest puree of onion, but only by using a knife. You can use a Roku, you can use a blender, knives only. And the reason being is that if you overwork an onion, like in the blender or something like that, it leaches out a ton of water and it just gets really oxidized and kind of weird. And so we were just always going for the best possible version of anything we were doing. And now that I'm not cooking rice there anymore, I like to take my own liberties, like using leeks.
High heat, chef?
High heat, as high as your stove goes. We are on the highest because we're going for a charred leek stock. So you're not really going to hear anything in the pan right now. Nothing's happening. But
do you want to switch so I can see?
I already did. I beat you to it.
Perfect.
What you have here now, when we go and stir this, we'll see on the bottom all of the leeks have already started to blacken. And that's going to be our charred leek flavor. Now, we're not looking for totally blackened on every single piece of leek, but it's really nice that you have some spots of charred that's removing some of that moisture, that's working extra residual flavor that's going to be into our broth. So charred leeks here down on the bottom. Moving back over here to our leeks that we have finally cut. Leeks are very dirty, like I was explaining, right? So how do we clean this now that they've all been chopped? I like to cut my leeks and then wash them. I find you get a much better wash on the leek and you end up getting most of the dirt off. So I'll cut all my leeks. I'll use some sort of strainer, spider type basket like this. I like to come in and I'll grab all of my leeks. Even if I'm doing large cuts on leeks, or this is what I always do depending on how I cut my leeks. This is like a leek cleaning process. Then I'll take this basket, I'll go over to the sink or in like a big colander of water and just rinse these around. Wash them, ridge them out, get all of that dirt that may be caught in between all of the leaves and layers of the leek, make sure it's all gone, so that way we have nice strained and cleaned leeks. Good stuff. Questions?
One question, perhaps a question for later, but why is risotto often called the kiss of death on Top Chef? I think that's a good one to answer now.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're in the Top Chef fan club and you've seen many episodes of Top Chef or the show, someone actually asked me that, I think, when I was posting about the class on Instagram. I got that as a DM. And it just has to do with the lore of Top Chef, in the sense that usually if you try to make risotto on the show, you get it sent home immediately. And not because it's like you made risotto, but it's because people often don't realize, whether the chef testants or the viewers at home, that when you make something, people don't eat it right away. And risottos are one of those dishes that needs to be eaten immediately. It doesn't wait for anyone, whether you're in the restaurant, if there's a guest up from the table, or if it's the judge on Top Chef. So as rice sits, it starts to congeal, it starts to harden, it starts to get really as Paul Hollywood would say, it gets really stodgy. It gets stodgy. And stodgy rice is not a good thing. So they say it's a kiss of death because if you try to make rice, it's inevitably not going to get eaten when it should. And so it's going to sit around, and by the time someone actually gets to eat it, it's not
at its prime.
It's not at its prime. It's often like you'll see a lot of times people get in trouble for making fried food or fried chicken on Top Chef because it gets soggy and they don't eat it right away. And unless you have like a really, really good fried chicken recipe that will stay crispy for a long time, that's another kind of one of those Top Chef no-nos. It's trying to do that. Good question. So our leeks, here we are, nice, charred. We're not going for like totally blackened, like I said. We're just going for a nice bit of color on all of the edges, on the pieces, and this is as high as my pan goes, with no oil or anything down on the bottom.
So your stove goes, yes.
Yeah, as high as my stove goes with my pan in it. No oil, nothing else in here. We're going for like a dry roast that's going to help us get that blackened color. The best, the quickest, the easiest. If we were to put oil or fat in here, it's going to splatter, it's going to splash at us. Yes, you'll still get caramelization, but then you're going to also have fat in your stock, and you don't really always want fat in your stock, so we want a clean stock in this case. Now, to our leeks here, we're going to add our water. So this is just plain water. I usually go about 2 quarts, or let me rephrase that. I usually go about 1 quart of stock for each portion of rice that I'm cooking, just to make sure you have enough. Having a little extra stock never hurt anybody. At the end of the day, it's just water. So here I'm going to use 2 quarts because I'm making about 2 portions of rice, plus a little extra to make sure we have rice for our arancini. So right into our pan, I'm going to lower the heat. And everybody just get ready for this because it's going to splish splatter. Don't get scared. And then we can let that come up to a simmer. And that's our stock. A lot of people overcomplicate stocks. They don't need to be complicated. Stocks are really just like a flavor base, and there's a lot of different ways to make stocks and different variations of stocks. And depending on how you're going to use the stock will often dictate how you want to make the stock or what stock making technique you want to apply here. Since we want the greens and the rice to be the stars of the show and we don't want the stock to overpower things, this is a quick cooking stock. 20 minutes on a simmer is going to get enough of that kind of like charred leaky flavor that we're using all of the leek. We're not letting anything go to waste, and we're able to infuse and build some depth in our dish.
And if you're cooking at home, you can really smell it right now. It smells so
It's
charred,
delicious.
Wonderful.
It's a great aroma.
It's incredible. And then I did have another question. How much rice for 1 portion? You mentioned you're making 2 portions.
Oh yeah, I'm making about 2 portions. I would say, I'm used to doing things in grams. And I would say about 35 to 50 grams is a portion, depending on how big you want that portion. And I've talked about this before. Our portion sizes they're frustrating to me. I don't like to prescribe portion sizes because one, I don't want to tell people how to eat. I don't want to tell someone else how much of something they're supposed to eat or how much they should feel bad for. If you sit down and you eat 3 portions of cookies, I don't want to feel guilty for that. That was 1 portion for me. I don't care if that was prescribed 3. So I think rice, meatballs, pastas, no matter what it is, you got to think about it in the larger context of things. Is that the only meal you're having that day? Are you having a salad, an appetizer, a dessert, some bread, something else to go along with it? Is it for a group of sumo wrestlers, or is it for a group of nuns? So I think everybody's going to have a different appetite depending on who they are. And so taking all of those different factors into account, it's very hard to say this is X amount of servings. But a cup of rice, which is about 200 grams, serves about 2 to 3, maybe 4 portions. But like I said, it's hard to say. Is that a good enough answer? I hope that's a good enough answer. I'm sorry if it's not a good answer, but that's my answer, and I'm sticking with it.
Yes.
Good?
Yes.
Great. All right, so bringing our stock to a simmer here, right? So I'm just going to set this, one moment, I'm going to make some room. I'm gonna set this simmering over here on the side. And while that simmers and comes together, I've got my other pot. This is my water pot that we put on about 10 minutes ago. And this is what we're going to use to blanch our greens we got going on over here. So we're going to make puree. I feel like we made puree in one of these classes once before. What did we make? Spinach puree, herb puree?
I believe
something
so.
like that?
Yeah.
Similar to pesto, but not pesto at all. Puree is a little different. It's much more finer. There's a little more technique involved. But once you know this technique, you could apply it to any type of green, any type of leafy thing, even like any type of starch, like sweet potato, butternut squash, whatever it is, carrots. You learn how to make puree, the proper puree making techniques. You can do anything with it. Really, really useful information, right? So for the puree, I got my ingredients over here. I got my plenty kale and arugula. They do both really well. I chose that mix because I like the spiciness and body that you get from the arugula, but I really like kind of like that nuanced nutty flavor that the kale has, really crisp and refreshing. And I think the two mixed together play well as a puree and they're on their own as the greens. So for that, we got our mise en place, everything in its place, right? So for our puree, we got our, I guess you could call them aromatics or seasonings, our miso paste, our black garlic, and our honey. I like to have that on standby so it's ready to go. I have my xanthan gum, which if you've cooked with me before, one of my favorite like pantry staple ingredients in the restaurant. I use this like almost every day. What is xanthan gum? Don't taste it if you've never used it before. It's not something you taste. It's not even something you stick your finger in. It is incredibly hard to clean because it's very hygroscopic. It attaches to water and will just kind of get slimy and a mess and everywhere. So don't spill it. Try not to get water near it. But it is a bacteria similar to like seaweed that's grown on sugar, mixed with alcohol and dried and processed into this white powder. And it binds foods together. It acts like an emulsifier. It makes things smooth, thick, and creamy. If you've ever had salad dressing from the store or some sort of dip, or it's in a number of things. It's probably even in toothpaste for that matter. You've had xanthan gum.
Just don't overdo it.
Just don't overdo it. It's one of those things once you learn how to use it, it's great. But don't just eat it.
A couple of questions. How much warm water for the blanching?
I got like 2 quarts here. And really, I mean, yeah, you just got to be able to fit about 6 ounces of the greens into your pot. And don't worry, greens shrink when they hit hot water, so you don't need a giant pot.
Yeah, so just enough probably that size pot.
This is a 6-quart pot, probably filled up about halfway.
Yes, so not. And then can you use a substitute for miso paste? What would you use?
So if you don't have miso paste, you can use nutritional yeast, which will give a really kind of breath of umami and flavor. You could use tahini. That would be really good in here. You can use roasted garlic, although that would kind of bring out the garlicky notes, which I was trying to avoid, which is why I wanted to use the black garlic, because that gives more sweetness and nuttiness than garlickiness. Or altogether, if you don't have miso, you can leave it out. And the kale is really
good on
going
its own.
do all of the work. I just kind of these recipes that I develop and share with everyone. They're not your average recipe that you're going to find on a cooking blog that's super basic and what you would find every weeknight dinner. This is a recipe that I would actually use or serve or cook with that sometimes has an obscure ingredient, xanthan gum, black garlic, miso, things that you may not have in your pantry, but I don't want to change my recipes to make them easier to source. I don't know how to say it, the wording for
you
that.
You just want a different perspective.
Right, I want to share
recipes.
my authentic recipes, how I would actually do it.
Yeah, like a chef would.
An authentic recipe, that's what it is. I'm not going to change it to make it easier to make, I'm sorry. But, so we have those components here. We have our water ready to go, and then we need a blender. It's hard to make puree without a blender. You can totally do all of this, chop it all by hand, and mix it in a bowl, and you just have a very speckled rustic puree, which wouldn't be bad by any means, which is totally an option. You don't have a blender.
A couple questions, and then if you're going to use tahini instead of miso, it's just the same amount? Or
I'd say it's about the same amount. I think you can get away with that.
And then what if you don't have xanthan gum?
If you don't have xanthan gum, don't worry about it. There's no replacement for that. There's no substitute for that. Your puree will not be as, you'll never get it to that sheen, slick, kind of smooth scoop that you may see those perfect dollops when you go to your favorite fine dining restaurant, which is okay. just know that that's how it's done. That's how you get it, and that's how you get that like
But
silky,
you don't need
ripply puree. But you don't need it. You don't need it.
Do we simmer covered or uncovered?
I have it covered just so it doesn't evaporate and go away. You're going to use this right away, so as soon as it's boiling, ready to jump in there and have it ready to go. In addition to that, we have a water bath here. That's going to be to stop the cooking, to shock the greens, to make sure things don't continue to cook and degrade. One trick to keeping things nice and bright and vibrant, especially when you're working with green vegetables, is to cool them after cooking. When you cook them, you're breaking open all those chlorophyll cells, all of the things that plants use to photosynthesis, make energy, and that's where the green color of plants come from, chlorophyll. And so when you boil spinach, greens, kale, arugula, whatever it is, you're bursting open all of those little cells. The chlorophyll comes to the surface, and then in order to trap it, stop it from degrading, and keep it bright green, you need to shock it in something cold. That's where the water comes in. Where did I go with my other bowl? Drawing a blank here. Did I just set it down?
Did it disappear, Chef?
I don't know. Not sure. I could use this. That's all right. Oh, you know what? I put my rice in it. That's where it went. It's all right. Sorry. I digress. In our blender, we're going to use the blender here. Before we get our blender dirty with puree, I just want to jump ahead. No one get confused here, please. Warning, I'm going to put a little note. We're jumping ahead for 30 seconds, all right? We're thinking about tomorrow. And I just want to do this so everyone can see what I'm doing, and this is how I like to do it. Whenever I'm frying anything, so we're talking about tomorrow, we're talking about arancini, we're talking about frying. We're not working on puree right now, but just before my blender gets dirty, I want to show everybody the next step of the process. I have my panko breadcrumbs. Great for frying. One of my little tricks I always like to do whenever I'm using panko is to take half of it, put it into the blender, and you can do this in a food processor too. And no matter how much panko you're using, you take half of it, you put it in the blender, and you blend it super fine. And it turns into like this really fine breadcrumb powder. It's gonna get loud, just a second. Great, super fine breadcrumb powder. And then I mix this back into the whole chunky panko. And the reason why I do this is because whenever I'm frying something, I want like that full surface coverage for the coating. And if you just use the chunky panko, what ends up happening is like you have all these like sometimes little holes, or you have to use a lot of it in order to get full coverage on whatever it is that you're frying. But by mixing in the super finely ground mix, you have this like really great blend that's the best of both worlds. You have the super fine stuff that's going to kind of give you a light coating layer. Then you have the chunky stuff that's going to give you all of that texture on the exterior. So that's for tomorrow. You got your panko ready. Before you dirty up your blender with puree, let's buzz up some breadcrumbs, shall we?
Enough about arancini. Back to
rice. Back to the risotto. Back to our plenty puree. I love plays on words. I don't even have to worry about cleaning this. If you have gluten issues or whatever, yes, of course. But in this case, it's just some breadcrumbs, and I'm not worried about it. I'm eating it. I'm cooking it. We're all good. Disclaimer, right?
Disclaimer.
Always need the disclaimer. I'm going to go with my aromatics and seasoning down in the bottom of the blender. First things first. And these amounts that you have in here are kind of like a base. Think of them as like a starting point, a jumping off point. And you could always adjust these to your own personal liking. So like if you want it a little sweeter, if you want it a little garlickier, if you want it a little more funky, go crazy. Add a little more of this, a little more of that, and really play around with it and make it how you personally like it. I'm gonna come in here now with some of my black pepper.
How much black pepper are you doing?
This is 18 cracks of black pepper, or about 1/8 of a teaspoon, depending on how you would like to measure. Really like a nice little pinch of black pepper. Same thing. Kale, pinch. Kale, arugula both have like a nice peppery note, so I think the black pepper in there plays nicely. And then a pinch of salt as well. And the reason why I'm getting everything in the blender first is because this point moving forward is going to happen fast. So I want to say what's going to happen, and then just keep in mind it's going to happen quickly. We're going to get everybody in the pot. We're going to go right from the pot, super hot, right into the blender. Blend it all very smoothly, using a tiny bit of my blanching water if needed, just to get it to spin nice and smooth. Then we're going to pour that directly into a bowl here in our ice bath to cool everything down. Now that's how I like to make purees. This is going to be my bowl right in the ice bath to cool everything down. That's how I like to make purees. The reason being is because if I did it the other way, where maybe you've seen you take your greens, you put them in the water, then you shock them in an ice bath, and then you blend them, you're putting the greens directly into a bowl of water. Water doesn't taste like anything. So it's going to put flavor in this water that you're going to throw away. When instead, I rather keep all of the flavor in the greens, in the blender, in the puree, and just work quickly and cool it down quickly, rather than putting it in ice water and kind of diluting my final product.
And then can you repeat what just goes into the blender? What you have in there?
Salt, pepper, honey, miso, black garlic.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
That's our puree. And then tiny bit of orange zest. I like the orange. I think it kind of brightens things up. It's different. Citrus isn't in season right now. So like you could go lemon, you could go lime. I think orange is really nice, especially since it's like we're doing arancini later, which if you didn't know, arancini means orange in Italian, so kind of fun. We're gonna go a little bit of zest here. You can put as much or as little as you like. Tap that in. Beautiful. I love the smell of orange zest. Oh, it's so good.
Same.
It's like bright, citrusy. Good morning.
Reminds me of California winters.
Yeah. No, those Chicago winters with the snow. Oh, it's terrifying.
I want to switch the cameras.
Yeah. Will that be better? Can you get a better view?
Yeah. So you can see what's happening inside.
Oh, in the pot? Yeah. That makes sense. All right, so we're going to go in. Each of these packs of Plenty are really awesome, by the way. These, here, as you can see, come in these containers made from recycled material. They are fully recyclable, and they also have this really cool kind of seal on them. So you're able to pull them open, seal them, put the lid back on, and it keeps everything nice and fresh and beautiful in the fridge. So another great thing about Plenty.
Yes.
They have it really figured out.
I love it. Can we substitute confit garlic for black garlic if we don't have black garlic?
1,000%. Confit garlic, roasted garlic, or just leave it out entirely. I wouldn't go raw garlic.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do raw garlic. I would take raw garlic and even just like saute it in a little olive oil, and that would work. But I wouldn't just leave it raw. So I'm going to go almost an entire pack of greens here. And I'm going to leave some for the top of my rice because really, if you think putting raw kale on top of rice is weird, most kales, yes, that would be weird. They're chewy, they're hard, they're fibrous. Plenty kale, none of those things. So it actually showcases how glorious these greens really are by using them as a garnish as well as putting them in a puree. And then I have my arugula here that's going to go in as well. And we're going to just press that all down into the water. And these greens are already like so tender and soft. They're really not going to take long to puree at all. Like we're talking maybe 30 seconds. If you're using another variety of kale or another variety of arugula, you may want to leave them in there up to a minute, maybe two, just because there's a little more fiber going on. But if you're using the Plenty and you're able to get Plenty, really 30 seconds is usually all you need to get these totally broken down. And you can see almost right away. They get really vibrant. All that chlorophyll comes straight to the surface.
Beautiful.
And then I'm going to use one of these strainer tools to be able to pull everything right out of the water and go directly into the blender.
If I've got kale, arugula, microgreens, will that work? Should I still blanch them?
I would blanch them, but maybe for like 10 seconds. Just to like get that hot water on them to break down any bit of fibrous. But if they're microgreens, you're not going to have to blanch them long. And you probably need quite a bit of them because they're small, but that's okay.
Did you say it's 1-to-1 of baby kale to arugula?
I believe that's what the recipe says. I think it was 3 ounces of each. Bella's double checking.
3 ounces, 3 ounces. Yes.
1-to-1.
1-to-1.
All right, so we are here in our blender. Everybody's in there. I'm going to take just a tiny bit of my blanching water here, and that's just going to kind of help everything spin and come together. We're going to lid on. We want to cover the little porthole here just to make sure nothing splatters up on us.
Be careful.
And then things are going to get loud, so volume warning. I'm going to take a little bit of my xanthan gum. We're talking like the tip of a knife. If you were to just stick your knife in here and that little bit that hangs onto the tip, that's all you need. Tiny bit. A little bit goes a very long way. And that's it. It's important to work quickly and you have everything kind of set up and ready to go. So then that way you can shock your puree right here into my ice bath as soon as it's done. And you can put this through a strainer if you want it to be like super smooth and not any like speckles in it, just in case your blender didn't do all the work. But in this case, you know, we're cooking at home. I don't think we need to go through a strainer. One less thing for us all to wash. Tapping the edge of the blender helps get everything out. Beautiful.
Is that like the same trick with the ketchup bottle where you're supposed to tap the, or no, am I wrong?
That is a high, it's, you tap the 57
Oh, so
to get
wrong.
everything to
Sorry,
come out of
never
the
mind.
ketchup bottle. Some similar. And then,
Before that.
yeah, coming in here with a spatula just to move the puree around so that there's no hot pockets. Not the food, because those obviously we know are very bad now. There are no hot pockets in here that will continue to cook. And it's important when you have an ice bath, I always say this, but I always like to stress it, is that it's not just a bowl of ice, that it's actually like a bath, and there's water in there too, because that water is actually going to help conduct the cold temperature and pull the heat away from whatever you have in the center of your bowl. Very, very important, easily overlooked, and one of those things that could definitely cause your puree or whatever it is that you're trying to cool to not cool as quickly.
Speaking of water, did you know that Plenty saves about, what is it, 1 million?
A million gallons of water a week compared to traditional farm acre for acre, which is wild if you think about it.
And it's so important, especially since California's kind of going into this.
We're in a drought, or we're going back in a drought.
I believe so.
I think we're going back in a drought.
It's been unusually dry this winter.
Unusually dry, and as much as you think that maybe you're doing enough, thinking about the people that you support with your money, brands like this that are already thinking towards the future, already trying to do things the right way, using recycled materials, trying to lower their carbon footprint by using less water, things like that. We're all helping do even more for the future of not only ourselves but for our planet by working and supporting companies like this. And Plenty it's a young company. They founded in 2013. So only about 7 years old, but they've come a very long way in that short period of time. They're continuing to expand. And if you haven't been able to try this yet, even if you're on a future trip from now, maybe not in the immediate future, but you make your way to California and you're in a grocery store, you see it, grab it, try it.
Super
Please
delicious.
just trust me. It's really, really good and totally worth it. And I'm not just saying that. Trust me.
It's really good.
I try my best to only support things that I actually believe in and would genuinely support, regardless of any of the other contexts that are around it. And this is one of them. Even after this, I'm still going to be buying Plenty once a week. just not only for Bella, but because I enjoy it as well.
Yeah.
So, try it. Give it a try. Trust me on that one, right? So let's get rid of our blender. This is cooling down. Blender is done. Regroup, reorganize. Boiling water is done. We can get rid of this. Don't need this anymore. And now, whoa, here we go. Now it's been, 20 minutes or so? We can come back to our stock. So our stock has been simmering over here on the side. I'm going to do a little bit of straining action. I like these chinois colander type deals. One, because they're concave and colander-like in that sense, where they cylindrical. Cylindrical. Is that the word?
I think so. No.
No, cylindrical. This is cylindrical.
It's triangular.
I was a communications major. It is a cone shape.
Yeah.
And it works really well to strain things, is what I'm trying to say. So if you don't have one of these, they're fun. They're great. I like mine a lot. And we'll come in with our stock. You should see a very beautiful tint of dark green and brown here. If we take a look up close where we are, that's what our stock looks like after about 20 minutes. You'd always give it a taste if you're unsure. If you want, you could let this go longer and get more allium flavor out of it. But really, at the end of the day, stocks, it's important no matter what kind of stock you're making. Treat it like a bell curve, right? What I mean by that is it doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't taste like anything. It's getting better, better, better. It is at its peak. It's as good as it's going to get. And then it starts to degrade. And the vegetable fibers start to break down. And it starts to get really murky. And it starts to taste muddy. And it starts to get really cloudy. And then by this point, it's down over here. It's no good anymore. So whether you're making chicken stock or vegetable stock or mushroom stock or whatever kind of stock it is, just keep that in mind. There's always a peak. And if you push it past that peak, it's just not going to be as good as it once was. So we go here. We'll strain our stock. Carefully. It's hot, okay? These greens here, we don't need anymore. We're done with those. We'll set these here down on the bottom. Give our cutting board a little wipe. And then I'm going to come over here and start thinking about my risotto, all right? So this is the first thing you're going to notice that is probably going to freak everyone out. I don't have my stock on the stove in a pot next to the rice boiling. To me, that's okay. If you have very hot stock that's either just came off the stove or is near the stove on it and it is just not cold or room temperature, it's beyond room temperature, that's good enough. And the reason being is you just don't want to add something to your risotto pot that's going to take longer to keep your boil or your simmer of your rice cooking. If every time you add something, it brings down the temperature of the pan, that's bad. But if you add something and it's already similar to the temperature of the pan, that's okay. And I want to show you that it's okay by doing it right here. Not only because I only have one burner, but because you don't necessarily need to have boiling hot stock when you're making rice.
How do you identify when a stock is at its peak?
How do you identify when a stock's at its peak? Unfortunately, it's just experience. It comes with tasting and trying and tasting and trying and messing some up along the way. So, making stock every single day. Usually you do that in a restaurant. Rarely do you do that at home. But, you're making vegetable stock every day. You're making chicken stock every day, something like that. And you taste it throughout the day. You taste it throughout the night. And you just, taste the tasting spoon, throw the spoon away, but you're trying it. And you muscle memory. Your palate is a muscle. People often forget that. They think just our biceps and muscles, but your palate's a muscle too. And so by exercising it, by tasting things, by taking mental notes, you'll remember what those flavors taste like and what something's like. So
well balanced, I would say, is definitely.
I mean, it's going to be like you taste it and you're like, that's good. And then you taste it a half an hour later and you're like, oh, that's better. Then you taste it a half an hour later and you're like, that's even better. Then you taste it a half an hour later and you're like, oh, wait, that's not as good anymore. And then in your head, all right, I remember what it tasted like a half an hour ago. That's what its peak is. And that's really the only way to kind of it's the same thing with seasoning. When you're adding salt to something, it's kind of that same process.
Did you season the stock with salt?
No salt in the stock. because I don't want I want to be able to control the salt. It's almost like thinking about unsalted butter. You don't want to use salted butter when you're cooking like this. You don't want to use salted stock for that same reason.
Yeah, just like with baking, you don't, or anything really, you'd never want to use
Yeah,
salted
rarely
butter.
do you ever want to use salted anything, because then you can't control how much of it you add. Where like, if I want to add a pound of butter, maybe I don't want to add that pound of salt that goes in there with it. It's a bad example, but you know what I'm saying. Because there's not actually a pound of salt in salted butter, but hopefully you get what I mean. All right, let's talk about rice. Let's get this started. I'm going to get my pan on very low heat here.
Very low.
Just so it's warming up. We're talking about 200 degrees as we get started. In the pan, we'll get started here. I'm using butter and olive oil. I like the mix of the two together. When I learned to make rice, we only used butter, but I think olive oil is quite nice when in rice, and you kind of get like the best of both worlds, a little bit of butter and a little bit of olive oil. So we'll get down into the pan, and that's just going to get melted and heated up while I talk to you about everything else we have going on here. Because I want to spend a moment before we get into things. Actually, you know what? Before we get into rice, I have my cleaned leeks. Clean leeks, here we are. We got our butter in the pan. We're going to start our sofrito. So that way something's cooking as we're talking about rice. Multitasking. That's what the kitchen's all about, right? So we're going to go with our leeks.
So those are the leeks.
These are the cleaned,
yes,
rinsed,
the ones that you use
finely chopped leeks in with our butter and oil over very low heat. I wouldn't say as low as your stove goes, because some stoves have like that melt mode where they're just like warming the plate.
So low.
Or go low. You want things to cook down, but you want no color here. You want no sizzling, no action, as I would say, happening in the pan.
Can you switch real quick so you can see?
Yeah, if you want to get a little close up, this is what we're looking at here. Very low heat. We're melting down the leeks in that butter and oil. Getting nice and soft and translucent. Great. So, that's going. Our sofrito started. Time to talk about rice, all right? What is risotto but a cooked rice? And one of the properties of risotto is the kind of rice that you're looking. So if you're not familiar, rice is a grain. There are different varieties of rice grains, just like there are different varieties of just about anything out there. Risotto is made and can usually only be made from a short, sometimes medium grain rice. When you're talking about rice, you're not just talking about the grain size, but really you're looking at and thinking about the amylase and amylase pectin that you find inside of the rice. The ratio of those two things are going to control how starchy a rice is. So short grain rices have more of that pectin in them that make them even starchier, that make them nice and creamy, that hold them all together, and that make the magic of risotto happen. Longer grain rices, things like jasmine, basmati, Carolina Gold, have much more amylase and none of that amylase in it, which then causes the grains to separate. They become fluffy, they stay apart, and they're not necessarily going to make the best risotto. Granted, you totally could still make risotto with them. It's just going to be a little different and a completely different technique. For the sake of today, we're talking about like the classic Italian version of risotto. So when you're looking then at short grain rices in Italy or Italian varieties, you really have, there's, I'd say, what I've seen maybe up to like 7 different varieties, many of them hard to find here in the US, and you may never even cross paths with them in your life. But 2 that you can find pretty much predominantly anywhere in the world is Carnaroli and Arborio. 2 different varieties of grains, 2 very different kinds of rice. Arborio is the much more common version, the one you're going to find everywhere, but because it's common, it's often less expensive, and it's just not as good, unfortunately. So when I'm talking about all of these techniques, all of this whole method, if you're using Arborio, there are some things you're going to have to do a little differently, which we can kind of touch on, versus if you're using Carnaroli. Carnaroli is like considered the caviar of rice, the king of rice. It is the best rice you can use for risotto. It has a slightly longer grain than Arborio. It is firmer and harder than arborio, and it has more starch, which makes for a creamier, thicker risotto that all the grains are going to stay nice and separated. And it is almost impossible to overcook carnaroli rice, where arborio is a very fine line of going from cooked 1 second to overcooked mush in the next. And so if I had a choice, I'm always going to use carnaroli. If I'm in a pinch and I have to use arborio, just keep in mind it is a much more finessed style of cooking risotto, and it's very easy to overcook. But if that's all you can get your hands on, that's okay. You're still going to use these same techniques and the same method, the same basic principles and philosophy when it comes to cooking the rice. So, carnaroli, that's what we got here. The king of rice. Questions on rice? Are we all good? How's everybody's veggies looking? Our sofrito here that's melting down. I'm going to raise my heat just a touch now that I'm done talking about rice.
So what is it on now?
Now we're on like medium low.
Medium low.
211 degrees to be precise. If anybody has a control freak out there and wants to be exactly on the same temperature as me.
Your control freak is the thing that you're cooking on.
Yeah, oh yeah.
This
is called a control freak. But if anybody is a control freak and wants to be on the same temperature as me, it's 211 degrees. So we're going super soft, translucent here. And then you can think of rice in stages. In Italian, they say there are like 7 stages of risotto, and each one of those stages are very important in the process and the technique. The sofrito, cooking down your onions, is kind of like the base, the first stage of your rice. You want to cook these down until they're very soft. You don't want to leave them like chewy or hard or fibrous. No matter what kind of allium or sofrito base you're using, you want it to almost become one with the oil and the butter. Once you're confident that things are looking nice and soft, we can get ready to add our rice. But question first.
Yes, a question about the rice. Should you rinse the rice or no, keep the starch?
Oh, great question. Never, ever, ever rinse risotto rice. It's not like sushi rice where you want to rinse it first, or other types of rice, in that case, where you'd rinse it first. You would never rinse risotto rice. I can't think of any situation where you'd want to do that. You want the starch. You want everything that's in here. And you're buying, like, if you're getting the carnaroli, especially, you're getting like a premium product. You don't really need to do anything to it. Here, if you've never seen it, by the way. Wrong button. If you've never seen it, by the way, it comes in bags like this. Carnaroli, Acquarello. Acquarello is like the family farm brand name that grows the carnaroli rice. So they make carnaroli rice under other packages, but you'll most likely see it from Acquarello. And the cool thing about this brand and variety is they actually do like an aged version. So like this is like, I don't know, dried fresh in that sense. But they do a version that's at least 7 years aged, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Like I never thought you could really age rice, or what would happen if you aged rice. But it's an incredibly like premium product, just like you would age balsamic vinegar. It gets better. Rice is the same way. Those starches kind of and the pectin amylase kinds of change values and ratios as you age rice, making a firmer, harder grain that is almost more guaranteed to stay in its like rice-like form, while getting even creamier and starchier in the mixing cooking process. So if you ever see that and you have the opportunity to cook with it, highly recommend giving it a try. Really cool stuff.
You can buy it online, right?
Yeah, I mean you can buy everything on the internet these days. All right, coming up close, back to our close-up shot. We're gonna go rice right down into our mix. And now this next stage, this is the next stage of risotto we're talking about here. This is the tostado, the toasting of the rice. Very, very important. So as soon as you add the rice, take a good look at it. Look at each individual grain. What I want you to take note of is the translucent color. You see kind of translucent around the edges. You see a bright, opaque, white center of each individual grain. Now we're going to watch this and use our eyes and our nose. Get a good whiff in there. Smell it. All you should really smell is like melted butter and onions. That's really all you're smelling. But as this starts to toast, we're going to start to smell the toasted notes that what toasted rice smells like. You should hear a very faint sizzle in the bottom of the pan. If you need to turn your heat up ever so slightly, I'm up to 220 degrees now.
So medium, still medium low?
Still medium low.
A little bit under medium.
A little, like that.
Okay.
And we're going to continue the tostado, the toasting of the rice. And we're watching and stirring and turning. While that's toasting, let's take, 30 seconds, a minute, to talk about some risotto myths. People say you can only make risotto with a wooden spoon. I'm going to show you right now that's not true. I'm using a spatula. I like a spatula because it allows you to get down in the corners and edges of the pan. I know there are like diehard Italians out there that are like rolling over and like, oh my gosh, it has to be a wooden spoon. And it's like, it doesn't have to be, I'm sorry. Like, I know even Joe Flam saw I was using a spatula and like texted me right away and was like, oh, you're one of those. And I was like, I am one of those because I like practicality over traditionality. If that's even a word.
Sometimes.
I mean, it's more practical to use a spatula because you're able to get down in the edges versus a spoon. You can't always do that. You're able to monitor the edges of the pan. So one thing that's important as we're looking at this is always this entire cook process is making sure things are not creeping up on the sides of your pan. Keep the edges of your pan clean, pushing everything down into it. 2 reasons for that. You don't want any crusty bits forming here on the edges of your pan. And 2, you want to make sure things cook evenly. If you have bits of rice up here on the side or bits of onions that are kind of catching up on the edges of your pan and you're not taking the time to push them down, what's going to end up happening is it's going to cook very unevenly. You don't want that. So always watching your pan, pushing things down. Another myth is that you can't start and stop risotto the whole time you're cooking it. I'm going to dispel that in like a halfway kind of like wishy-washy answer. Once you start cooking risotto, you usually want to finish it. You wouldn't do this toasting phase or the tostado very far in advance. You could do the sofrito in advance. You could toast maybe half an hour before you want to start making risotto, but you wouldn't do it like the morning or the day before. It just wouldn't really make sense. Just like if you wanted to make, toasted nuts. The reason you're toasting your spices or toasting your nuts is because you want that fresh, vibrant, aromatic oils, everything to open up. And if you do it before, they start to seal back up and get nice and firm, and you're losing all of that wonderfulness that comes from toasting. You don't toast your bagels 3 hours before you eat them. You toast them right before you want them. Think of your risotto the same way.
What's the original reasoning behind the wooden spoon? I'm pretty sure it has to do with this.
I had a conversation with someone about that. The original reasoning behind the wooden spoon. They said it was due to something about releasing starches in the pan, and that you're supposed to use a wooden spoon in order to agitate the rice grains during stirring, and rubber spatulas don't do that, which, I don't know, you're stirring it, the grains are moving, you're making risotto. I think that's kind of one of those like old wives' tales that were passed down that I don't know how much truth is behind it, but...
At Quince, you used a spatula, is that correct?
At Quince, there were a lot of crazy rules that had to go around risotto. Like, for starters, like if you're not familiar, Quince, 3 Michelin star restaurant here in San Francisco. Michael Tusk is like the chef owner, considered widely by like one of the godfathers of Italian American cuisine, kind of fusing Italian and French fine dining together. And so known for pasta tasting menu only. We'd occasionally have risotto supplements on the menu. And risotto would come off the pasta station, and that's where I learned the proper way to cook risotto. And not anyone can just cook risotto at Quince. Let's just say that. You have to be ordained by Chef Tusk himself. It is a very grueling, intense process of not only standing by his side, watching him cook rice over and over and over and over again, but then once you start cooking it, is have him standing over your shoulder as you cook rice over and over and over and over again. And as you can imagine, maybe you can't, I'm going to help paint the picture. It is intense. He is not a very relaxed person. He is very, very intense, very firm, and wants things done a particular way. And so he's watching you do it. You learn the things he likes and the things he doesn't like. Having the right spoon or spatula, having the right pot, having the right everything was all of like this ritualistic process. When you were cooking risotto there, you couldn't use certain pots, you couldn't use certain pans, you could only use certain utensils. Everything was very, very precise, and it had to be done that way. Some of it for a very good reason, some of it just because that's the way he liked it done. So that's kind of where I learned, and I went through the crash course and the whole process of cooking rice. By the time I left, I think I was maybe like one of 3 or 4 people in the whole restaurant that was allowed to cook risotto in the restaurant, which was a really big deal. It didn't come lightly. So you can imagine how then now putting that in the picture, like, oh yeah, that's pretty intense.
But then also Mark Vetri, another chef who came.
Which I'll get to.
Okay.
Like, and then Vetri came and did a guest chef dinner with us, and that changed everything. And that's another story. So we're looking at rice here. It was on low, so we're just stirring and watching it. Let's get in there with our nose, give it a little taste or smell. Don't taste, it's raw rice. Smell. You should smell nuttiness. Not as nutty as you smell brown butter, but you get that kind of like aroma of toasted rice. That's what you're looking for. Then you look at each individual grain. That translucentness is kind of like exponentially increased. There's more translucent. You can see all around the edges of the grains of rice. That opaque center has kind of shrunk, if you will. And it started to take up all of those toasty, nutty qualities.
Did you salt the sofrito?
I have not. I have not added any salt yet.
Yes. And then speaking of pots and pans, any that we should use over any others?
I like pots and pans that have rounded edges, much like the one that I'm using here, because then I'm able to get down into the corners and pull everything easily and nobody's getting stuck. And I find we have a much even cook versus straight edged pots and pans are much harder to kind of get down in those edges. Really, other than that, going for something that's heavy with a thick bottom that conducts heat really well is important. But otherwise, you have some flexibility with your pots and pans. Next phase of risotto. Toasting, you can take this further if you want. If you want something really robust, really toasty, really nutty, you could keep toasting this until you kind of get that brown butter quality. I don't like taking it that far because I feel like that competes then with the rice and with the greens. So I like to take it just to where it becomes aromatic. You can smell it, you can see it, but it's not like brown and nutty from like brown butter. We have our wine. I like to add alcohol here. You go white, you go red, you go sake. If it's New Year's, you can even go champagne. At the end of the day, you're adding acid. You're adding a little bit of alcohol, and you're kind of like stopping that toasting process.
And then what if you don't drink alcohol?
If you don't drink alcohol, you could add a squirt of lemon juice here at this point. We're looking for acid. We're looking for liquid to stop the toast, to stop the tostado. So this is the next phase of the risotto cooking, is adding our acidity. Usually in the form of wine, but can be in the form of any sort of alcohol or acid. You could add vinegar, you could add lemon juice. If you're not into drinking or booze, it all works. And now what we're looking for, you can see everything starts to bubble up. It starts to suck up all of that alcohol. And now what we're looking for is to cook off all of those wine aromas and all that alcohol. One way to tell if you've done this very well is to come in, waft a little bit of that fumes up into your nose. If you can breathe it in and take a big breath, all that wine has cooked off. If you come and do this and it makes you cough.
That was a fake cough, by the way.
Yeah, that was fake. I know, I should be an actor, right? And you take a big whiff of it in and it makes you cough like that. It's because you're breathing in alcohol. Humans don't breathe alcohol, we breathe oxygen. So as soon as you're able to take in some of that vapor that's coming off of here, that's just air and not alcohol, you know you've cooked off all of your wine. You could also see by moving the rice in the pan that there's no more liquid down on the bottom, and we're ready to go to our next phase. This is another thing. I don't like to do this phase too early. You could start this if you're cooking dinner an hour, maybe a half an hour before you're ready. Kind of put it on pause here. Let it sit over on the stove. If you're using carnaroli, nothing bad's going to happen. If you're using arborio, there's a chance that the rice is going to overcook, that it's going to continue to cook, that it may start mushy. That's one of the advantages using carnaroli. It's very, very hard to overcook. You can do a lot of stopping and starting and stopping and starting, and nothing bad is going to happen. So something to keep in mind when you're choosing your varieties of rice. Now for our next phase of the risotto is adding our stock. So there's kind of two schools of thoughts here with this one. One is adding all of your stock at once and letting the rice cook down in the stock. The other, which I like to do, is adding stock little by little. And in the beginning, it's very hard to overdo it. You kind of think of it in that same sense as you're like, oh, well, I could in theory add all of my stock at once and it'll absorb it. But since you don't know exactly how much stock you need, it's kind of hard to do it that way. Instead, start with a few ladles at a time, and then over the course of cooking the rice, you'll go less and less ladles with each addition. So now risotto, everybody's heard, this isn't the first time I'm imagining you've tried or heard about cooking risotto. Does everybody mind to tell me if you want to go back to this view, but I feel like we should stay on this view while we're cooking. You tell me if I'm wrong.
It's a little lag.
Yeah, I know there's a lag, but tell me if I'm wrong.
I
think we want to see this.
Yeah, I agree.
And then, you can still see me in the corner of the screen.
You can see what happens to the risotto.
To the rice.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was saying.
Risotto.
Oh, are we? Whoa, we're cooking risotto. Yes, obviously. What you're looking for here is for the rice to absorb our liquid in here. We're looking for medium heat now. I'm at about still 212 degrees, to where there's a bit of a simmer. You could do this over high heat and kind of rush it if you're not going to walk away from it. But risotto to me are one of those things that you kind of are like half paying attention to. You don't need to stand here the entire time. You're allowed to walk away, but just know there's something on the stove and you need to constantly be tending to it. When I was learning to cook risotto in the restaurant, it would be a supplemental course on the tasting menu, and you would often have to start cooking it while you're doing everything else. You'd cook it to order. It would never be pre-cooked.
Never.
And if you think about a tasting menu, it's about 20 courses. Risotto was course maybe like 9 or 10, but you would start cooking it around course like 3, and then you'd have to time it, keeping track of where the diner is eating and how far they are in their menu, to have your risotto done right as they're finishing course 8 or the course before, so that it's ready, the rice isn't waiting, the guest isn't waiting, and everything's done in this beautiful, harmonious fashion. You can imagine in a restaurant that doesn't always happen that way, and things get very stressful in super high intensity environments like that. And so I like to work up the rice half on the stove, half off the stove, kind of as if I was doing other things, because then that way you're not totally committed to the rice cooking start to finish over a high heat straight through. You have much more control over the cooking process on a medium heat like this.
And then how much stock did you say to add to the rice?
So in the beginning, you could add a lot. I just added about 6 ounces. This is a 2-ounce ladle for everyone keeping track. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to watch and see exactly how much I'm adding, this is a 2-ounce ladle every time I add rice or add stock to the rice.
Yes.
Like I was saying, there are the two schools of thought. One saying you could add all of your stock at once and just cook down the rice. There's the other one that says you just add little by little. I like the little by little, but adapted to where I add a lot in the beginning and let that cook, and then I slowly add less and less and less. And that way, I'm kind of doing the best of both worlds, and I don't need to constantly be paying so much attention to it where it absorbs all of the water and disappears, versus having to stand here the whole time and add a little by little on my rice.
And then someone said, sorry, going back a little, when you're toasting, should you wait until the rice is completely clear?
The rice is not going to get completely clear. It's going to get more clear than it was when you started. So you're going off the visual cue of getting more translucent on the edges. It's not going to turn completely translucent. And getting sizzly and smelly. Like it should smell almost like popcorn. You know, that like toasty butter, the like roasted grains. Like think of freshly popped popcorn.
It should remind you of it.
And that's what it should almost remind you of, without the corn.
Of course, yeah.
Because it's not corn, right? So I've just added my second edition of rice. And now another misconception, and now we're talking about carnaroli here. Because carnaroli, the way the starches are kind of made and aligned in here, the bubbling and the boiling is enough agitation to cause the rice to release the starches and get nice and creamy and thick. So you don't need to be standing here stirring it nonstop. If you're looking at a different variety of rice, something like arborio, the way that the starches are aligned inside of each of the little grains, boiling is usually not enough agitation to cause the starches to release. So if you're using the arborio, yes, you do need to be stirring it a little more. It is a little more labor intensive, and you do kind of have to baby it.
Did you ever make risotto with the Parmesan broth method?
Oh yeah, of course. Like I said, any kind of stock when you're making rice will work depending on the kind of end product that you want. I rarely ever use chicken stock because chicken stock usually has a very intense flavor. And unless you're serving your rice with like a chicken roulade or like roasted chicken, you don't want that to be the main thing you taste. So usually you want it to be the Parmigiano Reggiano, and it's like a risotto bianco with like white truffles or just cheese and butter. Or it's like a risotto verde with the plenty greens and that. Or often what we would do, a lot of times like a spot prawn risotto or porcini risotto using mushroom stock or as prawn stock. And then you kind of cover it with truffles or cover it up with like some luxury ingredient. But you can totally do the chicken. Just keep in mind you probably want to serve it with chicken if you're using chicken stock. And that's why, because we're serving it with greens, we're using a very mild, mellow leek stock.
Mm-hmm. Always a reason.
Always a reason for everything. So keeping half an eye here now on our grains and our rice. We're stirring every so once in a while. We're kind of like pulling this aside just to monitor how much liquid is on the bottom of the pot. And that's kind of going to be my gauge on when I need to add another ladle or so. In the beginning, it's very hard to over add liquid. As the rice starts to cook, then you need to be a little more mindful of how much liquid you're adding. Something else we used to always do, which may be helpful for you, is to start a little timer as you start cooking the rice, like a kitchen timer, a cell phone timer, whatever it is, like counting up, not counting down. Rice takes 13 minutes plus or minus 5 minutes is like what we would say in the restaurant. Take that with like a grain of salt because it depends on so many more factors. If you're cooking a giant pot of rice, it's going to take a lot longer than a tiny pot of rice. If you're cooking over low heat, it's going to take longer than over high heat. And so that's kind of just like a starting point to know when the rice is done. So now as we're cooking the rice here, one thing in the whole process, in the ordaining, being inducted into the rice world of Quince and cooking with Chef Tusk, is constantly tasting these grains. So if you're new to cooking rice, this may seem weird, but when you're at this point, it's been about 5 minutes, coming in here with a spoon and tasting just a tiny, like 2 or 3 grains. They're going to be chewy. They're going to be hard. It's going to be weird. They may even get stuck in your teeth. But that was part of the process of cooking rice with Chef Tusk. He wanted you to be able to look at the grains, see what they look like, and taste them, so then you have a visual cue along with the mouth chew cue. So you have 2 kind of things you're looking at and you're tasting, and then you're looking at the clock and you're kind of comparing those 3 things and putting a little mental note on it as to like, okay, 5 minutes, this is what it's supposed to look like, this is what it's supposed to taste like, this is how chewy it's supposed to be. And that's what we did. And that was like, if you're cooking rice, you're eating raw rice all night long, every single pot, throughout the whole cook process, every couple of minutes, you're eating a couple grains. And it's also, 1, keeping you to make sure you don't overcook it, but 2, just another form of discipline. That all kind of changed for me when Mark Vetri came and did his cookbook dinner. So he came and did his cookbook dinner with us, and he was wanting to do a risotto course. And Tusk was like, great, Chef Joe, you're with Chef Vetri. You're going to cook his risotto all night long. Do one with him at the beginning, see how he wants it done, and then that'll be your dish to cook for the night. I was like, great, so excited. Love Mark Vetri, can't wait to do this. And then, cooking along, one of your role models in the kitchen, not only like super stressful, but like awesome at the same time. I start doing it and cooking it the way that Tusk likes it done. And Vetri's like, whoa, what are you doing? Hold on, aren't we using carnaroli rice? I was like, yeah, the best carnaroli, got it for you. Yes, chef. And he's like, all right, well, look, this is the best rice you could buy. it's very hard to screw up. Listen to the rice. Look at the rice. Nobody wants to sit around eating raw rice grains all night long. And he wouldn't let me taste it until the end, all night. And it was the hardest thing to do, would to be cooking these pots of rice and not be able to stick a spoon in there and try it until it was done. Because he wanted you to feel the rice. He's like, the rice is talking to you. The rice is going to talk to you. It's going to tell you if it's done. It's going to show you that it's done. Who in their right mind wants to eat raw grains of rice all night long? He's like, that's weird. And then Tusk is like pacing in the background, back and forth, just like, how come no one's tasting the rice? Like, freaking out. And then me and Vetcher are on the line cooking. Like, he's like, no, like, very, very different approach to things, much more relaxed and laid back. Like, we got this awesome rice. He's like, if you want, he's like, hey, pulls the pot off. He's like, you know what? We can set this over here. We'll come back to it later. We don't even need to finish cooking it right now. That's how good Carnaroli rice is. Like, let's just set it on its side, and then let's go have an espresso. We'll come back, and then we'll finish cooking it. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, it's fine. Trust me. So we left it on the side. We went and had an espresso. We came back, and we started cooking the rice. Tusk is like steam coming out of his ears now at this point, and inevitably the rice was perfect. It was cooked the exact same way as doing it the other method. And so, one, it was a great example of just how good Carnaroli rice is. It is the king of rice for a reason. It's very hard to mess up. And two, there's more than one way of doing everything. So learning that other method helped me develop this method in the way that I like to cook risotto.
I think that's really great because it's kind of goes the same thing for like farming too. It's like you have this way of farming, and then you have Plenty, which has this other amazing way of creating these greens too. It's just like with everything.
I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good example.
Yeah. Someone asked, was there Parmesan added before?
No cheese was added yet. And we'll get to there and why, but no cheese yet. And now we're about halfway done cooking. It's been about 10 minutes. I can tell by the way this looks, the rice grains have started to swell. None of them have opened up or broken down. But you can see that translucent nature, the opaque now has taken over the grains of the rice. You can still see each individual grain in here. And now this is when I like to come in with my first round of salt. Chef Tusk would not let us season till the very end. He had this reasoning, I don't know if there's any science behind it to be honest, of not seasoning the grains until they're done cooking because the salt is going to change the way that they cook. I've heard the same thing about beans, like don't season beans till they're done cooking because it's going to change the way they cook. I don't believe in that either. You always want to season your beans while they're cooking.
But for risotto, we're seasoning.
We're seasoning, same thing. I like to season it halfway through. So that way that you're building in layers of flavor, just like if you're making soup. I don't like waiting until the very end. So what you can see here, I've been talking. I have not been stirring this the whole time. I'm just coming in every couple of minutes, giving it a nice kind of workaround, making sure the edges of my pan are nice and very clean. I'm going to come in with another ladle here, maybe two, because I know now we're at that like halfway point. So I'm no longer going to go 3 ladles uncontrollably. I'm going to do about 2 at a time, keeping the stirring happening. That's going to help release starches from the rice, but because we're using the Carnaroli, we don't necessarily need to stir the whole time. That agitation from the bubbling and from the boiling in the pot is going to be enough to kind of move and break things up. Questions?
Yes, we do have a question. If you're doing a mushroom stock, would you do it the same as you did the leek stock? Just let the mushrooms simmer in a water for a bit. Do you use the stems and caps?
Yeah, so mushroom stock, I've done it 2 different ways. My favorite way to make mushroom stock is to take like all the button mushrooms. Buttons actually make really good stock. Like porcini's, like fancy mushrooms, obviously better, but buttons make a really great stock. You take all the button mushrooms whole, rinse them, get all the dirt off of them. Put them into either like a meat grinder or a food processor and pulse them totally to like almost like a puree. And you have this like brown looking mushroom mash. Then you put that down into a pot, a little bit of salt. The salt is going to help draw out moisture from the mushrooms. And then you're going to just saute those for a couple of minutes. It's going to soften things up. It's going to pull out a bunch of water from the mushrooms. As soon as you see all that water come out, then I'll add all of my stock on top. I'll let it simmer for about 20, maybe 45 minutes, and then strain it all off, and you have the most decadent mushroom tea that you could use for anything. But that's my favorite way to make mushroom stock.
What herbs do you grow at home legally? LOL. And where would you recommend someone who does not have a green thumb to start?
Well, technically, because we're in California, we can grow anything here legally.
But
I know what you're asking. I actually don't grow herbs here because a couple of reasons. One, I just moved back to SF, so I have not set up an herb garden. LA has a lot of pollution, so I didn't really feel comfortable growing anything outside and eating it.
No.
But what was the question? A green thumb? I think basil's really easy to grow. Rosemary is incredibly easy to grow. Thyme is easy to grow. Mint is very easy to grow. A lot of it just has to do with like making sure you have the right level of sun and deciding where you want to put your little herb garden. Watching that area for like a week and seeing how often it gets sun and how many hours a day it gets sun. And then like doing a little Google research and like how many hours a day should mint get? And it'll be like, 4 to 6. And then you're like, oh great, that spot right there gets about 5 hours of sun. Perfect. That's where I'm going to grow my mint. And that's the best way to kind of make sense for your area or where you are. And yeah.
It depends on the climate.
Yeah, or you can set up an entire vertically integrated farm like Plenty does, and they do it very, very well.
Yeah.
If you look on the recipe page, which I'm sure everybody did at this point, you can see photos from inside of their grow houses, which are super, super cool. Really interesting stuff. Looking back at our rice here, we're getting closer and closer. We're about 3/4 of the way through. The grains are continuing to swell. We are still getting things. If we separate the grains, you can see it's starting to get nice and creamy. It's coming together. At no point does this ever look soupy, where all the grains are kind of separated, floating in the stock. It looks like a very creamy, mixed together mass. At no point is it very thick. Like, should risotto ever fit into a ring mold? No. Risotto should never kind of hold on itself. It shouldn't pile up. That means it's too thick and it needs to be let out just a touch. So coming in here, we're going to go a little more stock. We're coming to the end. I think I touched about on anything. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm going to go on heat a little higher as we finish this off, because now I'm here standing and watching.
What's the heat on now?
So now we're at about 221.
Which
is right above a boil. I would say medium high.
Medium high.
Medium high, and I'm swirling, I'm twirling. And the reason now is because, all right, we've talked. The rice has been slowly cooking. Now I can move up the heat. I'm here paying attention to it. And if you wanted to cook it over high heat like this the entire time, yes, you could be done in 13 minutes, have the risotto finished. But, if you have other things going on, you're taking photos for Instagram or you're hanging out with the fam, risotto does not need to be cooked super fast, super high, start to finish. It can be a very relaxed, laid back process, much like we're doing here today. So the reason why I'm really swirling and twirling at this point now is to not necessarily work out any of the starches, because that's going to happen automatically from the boiling. What I'm actually doing is just making sure nothing's sticking to the bottom, because I'm over high heat now, and I don't want anything to kind of burn or scorch. And so it's just important to kind of watch. The other thing, like I said, we're always keeping the edges of our pan nice and clean and wiped down. Very, very important, so that way you don't have any rogue grains of rice kind of hanging up on the edge that are not cooking evenly.
Smells so good.
Smells so good.
A couple questions. Why did you move back to San Francisco? And welcome back to San Francisco. My top chef, GF Creshinger Risotto, wants to know what neighborhood you're in. Well, we're looking at a couple places to open restaurants.
Yeah, opening a restaurant is the long-term goal.
Yeah, I think a couple neighborhoods.
We had an opportunity to move back here. We didn't want to re-sign our lease in LA. We knew that we were in love with San Francisco. We fell in love in San Francisco, and we didn't want to plant roots in LA. We just thought maybe we would when we were down there, and we're like, you know what?
3 years is good.
3 years is good. San Francisco's for us. We like Northern California. We love Northern California.
We love Northern California.
And so, we had an opportunity to move back. It made sense, and we did it. All right, we are getting very close here on our rice. And then I'm going to actually, sorry to go up and down. I'm lowering the heat again because I realized we need to grate some cheese. So we're going to keep half an eye on this. Let's give it now. We're getting close to the end. what we see here, if we look very closely, is you can still see all the individual grains. It's nice and creamy. It's holding together. None of the grains are split or broken open. They're totally opaque all the way throughout. There's no more translucentness to those grains. And now we can give it a little bit of a taste and kind of see how al dente they are. Yes, I said al dente. Oh. Rice should have bite. There should be some chew to it. No crunch, but
it shouldn't hurt your teeth, but it should have.
There should be some texture. You should be able to put each individual grain in your mouth and it not be like oatmeal. It should not be like paste. You should be able to taste each individual grain and bite down on each individual grain. That is a sign of a proper risotto. I thought you had a question.
No questions. Are you gonna switch over the camera so we can?
Yeah, so if we could watch me grate cheese.
Yes, everyone can grate it together.
Welcome back over here, guys, right this way. So we got our microplane, our Parmigiano Reggiano is what I'm going to use to finish the dish here. And I like to always grate cheese, little pro tip here, onto a piece of parchment paper. I find then you're able to pick up your grated cheese much easier and kind of hold everything together. When you're cooking rice here, one of the most important things as we're finishing it, we're coming into one of those final stages, is the mantecato, the mounting of the rice with the additional fat. French uses French cooking, or in France.
En français.
Yeah, en français, they'll use whipped cream to lighten up the rice, and as the mantecato or the finishing of the rice. In Italy, they'll use butter and cheese. One thing to note is I like to grate my parm or whatever cheese it is on one of these super fine microplanes versus using the pre-ground stuff, or even if you're using the pre-ground stuff, just make sure it's not the stuff with the really long shreds, like the shredded cheese, for two reasons. The shredded cheese is going to, it has like coatings on it, like anti-caking agents, that's going to make it melt really weird. And two, it's larger and thicker, so it's just not going to melt very easily at all. And the reason why using this microplane works really well is because you're able to have a very, very finely grated cheese that's almost like cheese snow that then is going to dissolve almost immediately into your rice, which is one of the important phases. You don't want to add all this cheese and it kind of takes all the heat away from your risotto. So we got our rice grated beautifully right onto the parchment paper so we can pick it all up.
Cheese grated.
What did I say? Rice grated? Yeah, we have all of our cheese grated for our rice. That's ready to go. And then make sure your cheese is room temperature. You don't want to add ice cold cheese right out of the fridge to your rice. What's going to end up happening is going to seize it up. You're going to pull all of your residual heat out of the pan that you would need just to melt the rice. Now, counterintuitive to that is our butter. This is the other half of our butter from the recipe. Remember, the recipe had 2 + 2. This is the other half now that we've set aside. This can be cold, and I like it cold because cold butter, you're able to dice up into all these super tiny pieces like this. Think of it as like little peas of butter, little corn granules of butter here. And that's one of the things that I learned at Quince that I think goes a very long way when it comes to making rice and finishing rice, is having super small diced, much like when you're making pie or something like that, you have the really finely cut butter that's cold. And that way you're able to disperse the butter evenly over the whole portion of the rice pot. And the cold butter emulsifies, more importantly, more easily than warm room temperature butter. And you want the butter to emulsify. You don't want it to be broken or soupy or anything like that. So cold butter, room temperature, cheese, very small dice, very finely ground. These are important rules right here. These are like the little techniques and the tips and tricks that are going to make your risotto better than the person who isn't here hanging out with us today. All right, let's take a quick look back here at our rice pot. We've walked away for a second, and now this is a good example of what we don't want our rice to look like when we get to the mantecato phase. So see how I'm able to pull all this rice up here, and it's just holding, and it's not really letting loose, and it's become very kind of thick and pasty. That's okay. It's not overcooked because we've tasted it. It still has a little bit of a chew to it, but there's not enough liquid in here that the rice needs to become nice and creamy and emulsify with all of our fats we have over here. So instead we're going to add one nice little ladle of stock. We're going to work in that ladle of stock. So our rice then becomes creamy, nice and glazed. You can see all of the separate grains. Things start to come together. And we're ready for our mantecato. Now at this point, before you go mantecato, you want to be as confident as you can be that the risotto does not need any more stock. So I'm going to add just another tip of my spoon in there, because essentially, once we add our mantecato, we're done. We're going to get that last little bit of stock worked in, and then it's time for our star of the show, our puree. So whether you're adding any other type of seasoning agents or this beautiful kale puree that we have, using our plenty greens, this is where now you'd want to add your green. I don't like to add it any earlier than this because you're going to continue to cook it. You don't want it to get dull and pull out and lose that bright, vibrant, delicious color. So I'm going to add almost all of my puree here. I'm going to save some for my arancini for tomorrow. You don't necessarily need all of it. If you want to use all of it, by all means, get in there. It's delicious. You can use more, you can use less. Taste it. That's one of the ways to know if you need more of something. Do you like it? Does it taste good, or do you want more? So we're going to work in that green puree now. Give us this bright, beautiful, vibrant green color. Keep in mind that that puree does have some liquid to it, so it's going to make things just a tiny bit thinner, which is okay. We're still at a very good consistency here. It's nice and saucy. See how it kind of like moves around in the pan like that in one big mass? That's an excellent sign of really good rice. That's what you're looking for. If you don't see your rice kind of swirl and jiggle like that, you need a little more liquid in there, okay? Now, we know we're nice and hot. We see steam. There was a little bubble there happening. So now we're at a very good point. We're going to kill the heat. Heat's off. Rice is still on the stove. We're going to add all of our cheese. We're going to add almost all of our butter, probably about 2 tablespoons. I cut a little more than I need. That's okay. If you really like butter, go crazy. Use it all. And then, very important, lid. Don't touch it. 30 or 60 seconds. This is the resting phase. A lot of people freak out here. They're like, oh my God, what did I just do? I just put everything in the pot. I put the lid on. I didn't touch it. I didn't twirl it.
That's what you do.
That's what you do. That's what you did. That's what you do. And at first I thought this was something that just Tusk did. And I was like, that's so weird. Never seen this before. It made me really uncomfortable. But it reconfirmed with me when, Chef Vetri did it the same exact way. And I was like, okay, this is part of it. The more I read about cooking rice and books and Italian history, this is part of that process. It's called the resting stage. So we've mounted it with the fat, our cheese and butter. Now we're resting. It takes about 60 seconds to rest. What the resting does, it's melting the butter. It's starting to melt the cheese. And it's going to help everything emulsify much more easily now as that time comes. I'm just going to give my cutting board a quick wipe down here as we're waiting.
To reset a little.
Yeah, we'll do a quick little
Wipe down,
reset action. And we have our plate we're going to go on. Beautiful. About maybe 10 more seconds. We're going for 60 seconds. Off the heat.
Timing, Chef?
Yeah, mental math
okay.
here. I'm mentally timing this. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right, so now lid off. Back into the pan. Now, last part is this agitation. This goes back to releasing any of those last final starches, as well as melting the cheese, emulsifying the butter, and swirling everything together. This is releasing any last bit of starch, coating all of those grains with the rice. Swirly, swirly, twirly.
And the heat's back on.
Heat is off.
Heat is off.
We're not back on the heat. And that's why it's important we have nice temperature management. That's why our butter was cold, but our cheese was room temperature, so it didn't kill the heat in the pan. That we had a nice bit of residual heat before we did our mantecato. And what we're looking at here is all of these individual grains. Look at that. That is a beautiful sign of risotto. It is pooling off of the spoon. which is exactly what you want. You should be able to see everything. Give it one more taste, see if you need any extra salt or anything. Keep in mind, your cheese had some salt in it, so don't go crazy. You may or may need a little more. And now, we'll come here to plate. And I'll do it here so we can all see very closely what we got going on. What we're looking for here is, as we're plating our rice, risotto, they say, should flow like lava. It should not pool into a big bowl. A lot of times risotto should properly be plated on a excuse me, I got rice in my throat.
Are you okay, Chef?
Risotto should be plated on a plate. Risotto should be plated on a plate, not in a bowl, and it should let itself out to the edges of the plate. The Italians have a phrase that flows like lava. I forget how to say that in Italian, but just trust me when I say it. If there's any Italians in the room and you know how to say that, let me know.
So this is like a shallow bowl.
This is a shallow bowl, but flat all the way on the bottom. You can see that the rice easily flows to all the corners and edges of the bowl. If you need to, you can always tap the bottom of the bowl, and that'll help spread everything out. But really, look here. This is exactly what we want. Each individual grain, everything separate, nice, creamy, emulsified, thick, but like lava. And then we're gonna come in, my favorite part, is take the last of our greens here, and I just like to dress them all the way around the edge. So then that way you can still see your beautiful rice. You see all these beautiful plenty greens. And now you can cancel your trip to Italy. Now you have risotto at home. Better, I don't want to say better, just as good, if not better, than you would find
In a restaurant.
in a restaurant. And you made it all yourself. How about that? Huh? I'm super proud of this. And you should be too. But that's not all.
Wait, try it.
Oh, we're going to try it.
Yeah, of course.
Duh,
You're
obviously.
trying it with everyone.
Here we go. Taste test.
Taste test and then give it to me, Chef. Thank you.
Very important. Oh, yeah. Pick it up in the spoon. It should fill that little hole that you pulled from because it is not thick. You can't plate it in a ring mold. I'm looking at everyone out there that I've ever seen plate risotto in a ring mold. That's wrong, and it hurts my soul. But now you're never going to do that again, and you're going to have it like this, and you're going to be like, oh my God, that's what risotto's supposed to be like. Oh, it's so good. And let me tell you, these greens make such a good complement to the rice. They're hearty, they're rich, they're packed with flavor. And like I said, I'm not just saying that. Like, if you were able to get these, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you were not, please do yourself a favor. Try these. Bella,
Yes.
let me know
Thanks, Chef.
how we did. How did we do? All right?
Ooh, so good.
So good. The good stuff, huh?
I hope everyone else is at this phase too.
All right. Now, that's not all. We're here still today. Let's do one more thing, shall we? Let me get this stuff out of the way. We're done with this and with this. Let's clean up a little bit. Let's get a little clean down action. All right. Now you have all this rice. Maybe you made a little too much. What do you do with it? Well, you make arancini. What is arancini? It is fried rice balls. They're golden fried rice balls. They resemble so much so they named them after an arancini, which is an orange. And so the best way to make these, one of my favorite ways, super easy, my opinion, the best leftover risotto. You know what else I like to do with leftover risotto as a side note? It works well as a pasta filling. I know. Maybe you've never heard of that. Maybe that sounds weird, but just trust me. Let it cool down, put it into a piping bag, load it up with some extra cheese, use it as a pasta filling as well. You'll be very happy. You'll be very, very happy indeed. But, you know, you're not making pasta, we're making arancini today.
Yes.
Easy enough, right? We'll get this together in the next couple minutes. We have our rice. What I do think is important is to let your rice cool down. So, we have our bowl here. I'm going to get a bowl. My rice goes into the bowl. This is my leftovers. All done with that. Now I'm going to grab my shredded cheese, and we're just going to double down on all the cheese here. My rice needs to be cool. If I add cheese to this, shredded cheese, and my rice is not cool, the cheese is going to melt. I want the cheese to melt when I fry it, not when I add it to my rice. So make sure your rice has cooled down before you get to this step. We're going to add our shredded cheeses. You can use any combination of cheeses that you'd like. You can load this up with mascarpone. You can go tons of extra parm. You go mozzarella, cheddar. Heck, I mean, go crazy. Go Greek in there. Get a little feta. The world is your cheese to choose, all right? We'll get this all mixed in. And then we could either let this cool in a container with a lid in the fridge overnight, or, sorry, I got to step over here because I can't reach. I'm back. Or right here in a bowl like that. Or we could do it in a baking dish, much like this. The reason why I like to do a baking dish is because I could line the bottom of the baking dish with parchment paper. Then I could lift the rice out of the parchment. And what I'm able to do then, what do I do with my knife? Right here. Sorry, talking to myself. And then what you're able to do, if you wanted, risotto or arancini is normally made out of fried rice balls, but you could always cut this into little squares, little rectangles, little bites, and you have like these little arancini blocks that we could fry up as well. So let me grab my hot fry oil from the stove. Everybody eat their rice.
I'm going to take this out of
Bella's
the way.
going to take the stock
I hope
container out of the way. This is a reset moment. 30 seconds. I'll be back. No one leave, please.
I hope everyone is enjoying the risotto as much as I am. I'm enjoying it there with you, even though I'm not physically with you. I'm there spiritually with you, enjoying the risotto. The orange zest is a good touch. I think so too. I think it's delicious.
The orange zest might be my favorite. Well, not my favorite, but
Addition.
like one of those like hidden nuances that you're not expecting. Using orange in savory applications. You don't see that often. All right, so oil. We're just using canola oil here. Any neutral oil works really well for frying. Put that down there. Great. Make sure we're on medium heat. We're going for about 350 temperature zone here. I like using one of these temp guns. That way I'm able to temp my oil from far away. It uses like a laser beam. You can see here, a laser beam. The cats really like this, by the way. If you have cats, you can use it to temp your oil and play with the cats. It's Bella's favorite thing to do. Just so you know.
Really expensive.
Yeah, the most expensive cat toy you'll ever play with. And then we'll come over here and we'll get the rest of my breading station set up. So we got a scooper, because you can make arancini into scoops. You could also make arancini as the squares, or you could just do free-form arancini with your hands. Any one of those ways is going to work. Here we have a little bit of flour. Whenever I'm breading or dredging things, I like to season all of the phases of the process. I have a little bit of water and my egg. I think the recipe says 2 eggs. For the sake of me not making all of this at once, I'm only going to use 1 egg, but 2 will be enough if you're making a big batch and frying up all of this. Don't forget to season your egg. And then we have our panko mix from earlier. Let's put these in order, shall we? We're going to come in here and whisk up our egg. And I like using these little to-go containers. I feel like everybody at this point has gotten takeout at least once this past year. And if you haven't been saving, collecting, and reusing all of these to-go containers, shame on you. But I love them. I feel like they work much better than Tupperwares. They stack, they all use the same lid, and they're much more universal, in my opinion. We use these in the restaurant too, depending on what things are, as well as those plastic deli containers. So I've always been a fan of these, long before everybody started doing to-go. Now we'll come in. Now, for breading and dredging, one thing to keep in mind is you want to try to have separate hands for different things, so you don't end up with the dreaded club fingers, as Alton Brown might say. One hand for dry, one hand for wets. Whatever you need to do to help yourself remember which is which, mental note. It just takes a little bit of focus and concentration. So in the flour first, the flour is going to help things stick. We can shake this around.
Did you put a total of a half cup or 1 cup of shredded cheese into the risotto?
I put what the recipe said. I don't remember off the top of my head. I measured everything out this morning, and a lot has happened since then.
Let me see.
Bella's going to look at the recipe page for you.
Half cup shredded cheese.
Half a cup shredded cheese plus the extra parm.
Yes, plus 1/3, yeah.
Plus the extra parm.
Yes.
All right, so dry dredge first. Here we go. Dust off any excess flour. You don't want too much flour on these bad boys. Then you go down into the wet. Extra flour is gone. And the great thing about these arancini, they can be made in advance. They can even be breaded and fried, or breaded and frozen in advance. You don't have to use all of this right away. You can cut them into the little balls, throw them in the freezer, pull them out, bread them when next time you're having a cocktail party 6 months from now, and you start to see your friends again. Hey, Gnocchi. Gnocchi just joined us. He always likes to join us right around 4 o'clock. You might hear him. So next, we're going to go with our egg mix. Moving that around, and you may have noticed I add a little bit of water with my egg. I don't like to go straight egg. One, the water kind of helps break up the whites and the yolks. It stretches the eggs, go a little further, and it doesn't make it as thick and heavy as an egg coating. So that way you have the moisture that helps things stick, but you don't have all that egginess from using just straight eggs. And that's just like a personal preference. So this is my dry hand. I'm not going to put that in this. I'm going to use my wet hand to touch my eggs. Then I'm going to go dripping, getting rid of any excess egg. We're going to go into our panko mix. And now, because this is dry, I'm going to use my dry hand to just coat my little rice balls with panko. And now this is where you have a personal choice. I've tried both side by side, and I don't want to say I like one better than the other. One has a little bit of a thicker crust, and one has a little bit of a thinner crust. You could fry them just like this from here, or you could go back into the panko, or I'm sorry, go back into the egg. Don't forget to switch hands. Use your wet hand now again. Egg, egg, egg. Flip these guys all around. Then drain into the panko. And if you're using the half ground panko like I like to do, you don't need this extra coating step. It's going to hold up without it. But if you don't grind half your panko and you end up with panko that is like somewhat thick and just chunky, you might need to do the double bread because panko on its own might not be thin enough or finely ground enough to stop this from sticking. So now my dry hand back in here, we're just going to press, make sure all of our panko is coated. Our little arancini nuggets of joy. I'm going to come back to our oil, do a little temp check here. 349. Nailed it.
Don't let Gnocchi see that.
Yeah, I know, right? That'd be terrible.
Don't let him see that.
And then we'll come over here to our fry pot. When I'm frying, very carefully, always dropping down into the oil away from me, so that way it doesn't splatter up. Into the oil. 2, 3. And now, I think this is the most impressive part of anything. My hands, totally clean, and we dredged and fried. No sticky fingers. No club hands, nothing crazy like that. Super proud of that moment. So I got a paper towel here. This is going to be my landing zone. For my fries, my arancini as they come out. They really only take a couple of minutes, usually once they float. So one of the things about frying that I always found really interesting, but always stressed me out, is that the fry times, you can usually trust your eyes. You don't necessarily need to set a timer. If something looks done in the fryer, generally it is. By the time it gets golden brown and delicious around the edges and it looks like something you want to eat and it's fried to perfection, chances are that it's cooked all the way through. It's nice and cheesy. It's not cold. I mean, there are some like things that break those rules. Like if you're frying something frozen or, you know, you're frying chicken, you make sure it's cooked to 165 degrees and da-da-da. But for the most part, if it looks golden brown and fried, it's ready to go. Now I have my other bowl here. This is going to be my next. Let me. Oh. Careful, careful. I'm going to set this aside. Now I have my other landing bowl here. Let's take half a look here in our pot. If you need to, depending on how much oil you have, you might need to give them a little flip. One thing too, people always get turned off from frying, think you need a giant pot of oil in order to fry something. That's not necessarily the case. You know, an inch or two of oil is all you need. Once you let the oil cool down, you could strain it, save it in a container, and reuse it 2 or 3 times so the oil doesn't look clean anymore. But don't let the fact that you have to heat up oil stop you from frying. Fried food is good. Treat yourself every once in a while, okay? Now, my other thing I absolutely love about this is pairing the other Mizuna mix with Plenty, or from Plenty, rather. Got some mustard greens in here, soy, really, really flavorful stuff. And this one can easily be overlooked. People might be like, oh, what are all these different greens in here? But trust me when I say, like, if you're looking for a variety of flavors, a variety of textures, a tiny bit of spice, like these mustards, have just the right amount of heat to them to where it adds some nice complexity, beautiful richness, and when you're eating something fried, having something crisp and clean and yummy like this, I think really just like one of those incredible contrasts. And so I'm going to use these as the bed for my arancini. You come in here, golden brown. Check that out.
Are the quantities you gave for the arancini assuming we start with a full batch of risotto?
Yes, like the full cup, and you only cooked for like 2 people. So the arancini is really there. If you have extra, you could always adjust it. You know, if it looks like not enough rice that you're adding, don't forget to season things right when they come out of the fryer, too, by the way. If, you know, have a tiny bit of extra rice and you're not going to have a full pan of rice left over, you probably don't need 2/3 or 3/4 of a cup of shredded cheese. I mean, you could, and it would be the most cheesy, delicious fried rice balls ever.
Delicious.
But, you know, use your common sense as a cook to be like, hey, this recipe is the roadmap. It's going to get me there, but I still got to drive the car, right? I got to pay attention to where I'm going. Just because the GPS says to turn down that one-way street, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to know better. I'm not going to go crazy with the cheese because I don't have that much rice to make. So use those little things and your knowledge to do things properly. I'm going to go a little bit more of this Plenty puree.
Can you fry and then blast warm in a 400-degree oven if you want to serve later, or best to fry before eating?
It's always best to fry before eating. That's not to say you can't fry and blast later in a 400-degree oven and they'll still be really good. If you're asking what's best, frying it and eating them right away. If you're asking what's realistic or what you could totally do for a dinner party, or if you just wanted to fry now and be done with it, yes, that absolutely works. Especially if you have an air fryer, you may be able to fry it in a pot like this and then use the air fryer to refresh them, and that'll kind of get them re-crispy on the outside. No, you cannot deep fry in an air fryer. You cannot bread these and put them in an air fryer and expect them to be cooked and done and golden like this. That's not how air fryers work. Essentially, air fryers are just like ovens with a fan. They have a fancy name. Someone did a really great job on marketing for them, but they are not a fryer.
If we want to freeze any arancini, do you recommend doing that before or after breading, but still before frying?
You can do either. You can bread and then freeze, your coating is not going to be as thick and crispy. It's going to end up being thinner because some of that starch from the panko is going to get soft from the egg, and it's just going to kind of like become one. It's going to have a different style of coating. It's going to definitely work, but if you can, I would bread to order or bread the day before you wanted to use them, and just freeze it as balls that were ready to be breaded. But like I said, that's best. If you wanted to just do something that works, yes, you can bread them, freeze them, 1000%. That'll work. Can I have the risotto so we can look at our guys side by side here? Oh, did you eat it all already?
I ate part of it.
Yeah, it's gone. Bella ate it. Sorry, but we do have these wonderful rice balls. Let's jump into one. I don't want to burn myself, but let's see what happens here.
Maybe show close up.
Show close
of
up
the
on
whole
the here.
dish.
Oh yeah, we got our beautiful. You know what else would be really yummy on here? We got that orange flavor already through the whole dish. Let's get crazy. Go a little bit of zest on top.
Let's get crazy.
Really kind of carry that through, because orange, the Mizuna mix, all those flavors work really well together. They really kind of like highlight not only the greens but the rice and what we have going on. And then coming in here, hoping not to burn my fingers. Let's see if we get a nice gooey, ooey, oh baby, cheesy goodness. Careful, don't drop it into your hot oil. You don't want to hurt yourself, right? All right. Man, that was fun. Can I taste one? Taste test. Oh. Now we're talking. Fried rice. Such a treat. Great snack. And these greens, the perfect complement to something fried. And you know what? The kale doesn't get lost. Even though it's been fried, even though it's used in the rice, you still taste that all the way through. I'm excited for all of you to try this with your leftovers.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yes. And I know we're on a little bit of a lag, but
Yeah, we're on and we're doing great on time.
Yeah.
4 o'clock. Look at that.
Yeah, thanks to Plenty.
Thank you. Shout out to Plenty. If you haven't used your coupon yet, don't forget, give it a whirl. It's in the welcome note that you received when you signed up. Plenty right now is only available in the Bay Area. Soon enough, it will be available in LA. They're getting ready to open one of their grow farms, vertical farms down there.
And then I bet around the country soon too.
And then hopefully around the country as well. It's still a very young company, but they're off to do really great, amazing things. And I am excited for everyone to give it a try. I know I will continue to eat it long after today. It is going to become a new staple.
Well, it already is.
It already has become a staple
I
in our
literally
fridge.
stand in the fridge eating handfuls of the crispy lettuce.
She does. Oh yeah, they also have, there's a yellow container that does the crispy lettuce. Really, really good. That stuff is like, it's almost like as if like, imagine the best version of romaine and little gem and butter lettuce.
Together, yeah.
All
for sure.
kind of like had their own little micro baby. And then when you eat it, it is crispy, crunchy. But I think the most interesting part about it and intriguing part to me is it is like filled with juice. It's like juicy greens. Very rarely do you like eat a vegetable and you're like, oh, it's so juicy. Normally it's something you say about like candy or meat. Where like all of these greens are like juicy. And I think that like goes to show that they know what they're doing. And really, like when you're looking at cooking and farmers and what they have going on, like they have a really good recipe. You know, they're able to control the nutrients, the water, the light, all of the components that go into growing vegetables to make a very, very superior product than what you can find out there regularly. So, I mean, like I said, shout out to Plenty. Big thank you to them for being here today. And an even bigger thank you to all of you. I appreciate you all letting me into your homes, welcoming me, both of us in, allowing us to do what we do. We're going to continue doing these virtual experiences as the year goes on. We'll see, obviously, as things change and what happens. But, you know, my goal is to go back to getting to cook for people again. And I always like to say, everyone that I have cooked with, I really like I really would like to actually cook for
Yes.
you, especially more so than anyone else. I'll do all the dishes. I'll do all of the work. I'll do all the cooking. You just get to enjoy, and we will share stories, much like we did today, all around food. So thank you all ever so much. Are there any other questions before we get out of here?
See you next weekend for tortellini. Oh yeah, taco emoji.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Duh. So we have the taco emoji, obviously. If you know what I'm talking about, great. If you don't,
Well, for this class, I think instead of using the taco emoji, we should use the greens emoji.
the greens. If you type in herb, it's the sprout with the leaves on it.
Yeah.
So we'll use the green emoji for this class. So if you're new and you know, the taco emoji is kind of like our little insider secret that you've taken a class with me. You send me a direct message on Instagram at chef.joe.sasto, which I forgot to mention. I hope everyone was taking pictures. Please don't forget to tag me and Plenty at chef.joe.sasto in all of your creations from today. I want to see what everyone makes. It's inspiring to me. I love reposting it, and I love hearing everyone and seeing everyone's stories. I honestly and wholeheartedly mean that. But use that emoji if you have any questions and you send me a message. And that way I can see your message in that little header line, and it has the emoji. And I know that, you're part of the club. We're like best friends at this point. So,
Besties.
I like to treat my best friends with priority treatment. So yeah, don't forget, post photos. And next week, that came up very fast.
Yeah, really quickly.
Due to popular demand, we're doing tortellinis. Tortellini. There's no S. We're doing tortellini next week. Learn a tortellini dough, filling, everything, start to finish. One of my favorite pasta shapes. And just like risotto, often misunderstood. So link for that I'll send out if you already have seen it. You can find it on the Chef's Feed page. But otherwise...
Any questions? Any timeline for the restaurant opening?
Unfortunately, right now, with the way the world is and the way the industry and the landscape is looking, there's no timeline. We're waiting to see, I guess, vaccine rollouts is the first step of the process.
Yeah.
To then know where, what, when. You don't want to jump on a lease too early before you could actually open a restaurant that people can dine in at. I'm going to leave everybody that has restaurants. I want them to be successful and to stay successful with takeout, to go, outdoor dining, and all that fun stuff. And then I will do something when it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Until then, support your local restaurants. Get takeout.
Yeah.
And get Plenty.
Yeah, Plenty too. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That's it.
Yes.
No questions?
Gnocchi, do you want to say bye?
Man, what a great group today. Everybody,
Yeah, I'm so happy everyone cooked along.
yeah, so good. You guys want to see Gnocchi? Hey, come here. He's looking at me like I'm crazy. Gnocchi doesn't like to be on camera, but sometimes he will. All right, Gnocchi, say bye to everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Say
Bye, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
Bye, Gnocchi.